And Russia's defense ministry has slammed the reported American deployment of rocket launchers over to Syria. The ministry added that the experience shows these weapons are more likely to be used against Syrian government forces rather than against the terrorists. The weapons in question, the High Mobility Artillery Rocket System, also known as HIMARS. Meanwhile, during a hearing on Capitol Hill this morning, Defense Secretary Jim Mattis was met with criticism regarding his request to substantially increase the already increased defense spending budget. For more now on all of this, we're going to go to Michael Maloof, former Pentagon official. Mike, let me just ask you right off the bat here. Is it a good idea to give people like Mattis or Dunford to let them sort of take the reins on decision-making when it comes to the Middle East?
Well, the president has given them decision-making of military decisions in the field. What is really needed, and which these two gentlemen lack, is strategic thinking. And that's what is missing in the inner circle of the Trump administration. As far as I'm concerned. It can't
come from Trump either, right?
Well, that's a problem. So that's why we're seeing some very serious issues. For example, we really need to be working with the Russians, the Iranians, toward a solution on not only Syria, but I might add Afghanistan. Mattis is getting ready to recommend more troops to Afghanistan. We don't know in what composition or anything, but that's a military approach. What is ultimately required in that, as well as in Syria, is a political
a State
decision.
Department. Something needs to come from the State Department.
A political decision, yeah.
Now, the Saudis, as we know, are sort of the de facto leader in that region of the world, at least in the GCC, and they're really ramping up tensions with Qatar. But the often overlooked and ongoing problem that at least you and I have talked about for 2 years now is what's happening in Yemen. And today, Senator Rand Paul brought up the humanitarian crisis that's happening there now. Take a look.
The humanitarian crisis in Yemen may be worse than Syria. Let me repeat that, because nobody in America is listening to this. Everybody's paying attention to some silly show trials and silly stuff going on in committees. Nobody's talking about this at all. They say it is worse than Syria. Millions of people have fled Syria. Hundreds of thousands have died, and people are now predicting Yemen may be worse. One refugee group said this, that the impending famine in Yemen may reach biblical proportions.
Biblical proportions, Mike. How do you think Senate will respond to this plea?
Well, if they're listening, which I tend to doubt, it's going to just pass by them. This is a very serious threat. I think what Senator Rand Paul has pointed out is very, very serious. We're about ready to give another $110 billion of arms to Saudi Arabia. They're going to be using those arms in this kind of conflict. He's right. Nobody's addressing the Yemen problem, and we're aiding and abetting it.
Right, exactly. The U.S. arms deals are being used directly right now in Yemen. And earlier we were talking about Qatar. Reports are emerging that the Qataris are also hatching their own deal to buy American F-15 fighter jets, a deal valued at about $12 billion. First of all, why is this happening, and how is this happening if President Trump is at least verbally backing the Saudis? Well,
he really has no choice. We have one of the largest bases. In fact, the forward base for headquarters for Central Command is in Qatar. And I think what the Trump administration, what appears to be what the Trump administration is trying to do, notwithstanding the criticism of Qatar, is try to keep some semblance of unity among the GCC, even though they're split asunder internally. And the Saudis are not helping the problem whatsoever. They're actually a problem in trying to in actually promoting the disunity.
They're fanning the flames then. So why are we hearing different stances on how to approach Saudi Arabia from the president and from the State Department? They're singing two different songs here.
Well, it depends upon what the ultimate strategy is, if there is one. From what I can gather, the United States was to manage the GCC countries. appoint Saudi Arabia as the titular head, which was the case. Basically, to go back to the 30-year-old security arrangement that existed prior to the Arab Spring in 2011. That included Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Jordan, as maintaining security in that region, which would also guarantee the security of Israel.
But that's all changing.
That's all changing, because I think the Saudis misinterpreted what Trump's intentions were, and because they've been implementing an independent foreign policy of their own since the Mubarak was ousted. They don't see any reason to go back, and we're not reining them in because we want all these dollars coming in.
Certainly seeing a power shift there. Thank you so much, Michael Maloof.
Pleasure.